What's poppin', everybody? Welcome back to another episode of the I Got a Story to Tell podcast. I am your host, Christopher Scott, the co-founder of Billion or Bust. This episode, I sit down to talk to Patrick Torres. He is the owner of Studio Frieght, which is a graphic design studio here in Columbus, Ohio. I've known Pat for about 3 years now. I hope you guys enjoy this episode. This will be the last one of season 2. We'll be bringing back I Got a Story to Tell February 1st for season 3. I hope you guys do enjoy this conversation that I had with Pat. Thanks again, and you guys have a happy holiday. So what's poppin', Pat?
Oh, just putting in a late work session on Sunday night, man. I'm a teacher also, so I was doing some grading, kind of get caught up on things before the week starts.
Did you know you were going to be a teacher? Like, did you kind of just fall into it? Well, first, I guess we should tell everybody what you do.
Sure. Well, my name's Patrick Torres. I'm a graphic designer. I own a small graphic design studio here in Columbus, Ohio called Studio Frieght. We've been running that this will be our 3rd year. But before that, we had another studio I don't know, for about 4 or 5 years doing that. I'm also a teacher, mural painter, dabbler. I don't know. I do lots of stuff.
Yeah, you do. Yeah, you just great.
Yeah, just a lot of creativity in my life.
Was it always that way? Was there inspiration from the household?
Well, not from my parents specifically. I mean, my dad was a carpenter, which definitely has a huge degree of creativity in it, for sure. But not in the same way as like the arts, you know. My grandparents on my father's side, though, they were both artists, painters, musicians, writers, things like that. So I pulled a lot from them specifically.
So, really, grandparents. Tell us more about your grandparents as far as that inspiration.
So on my dad's side, my grandfather was originally from Puerto Rico. He came over here after Korea. It was one of those situations where he was, kind of, and I'm sure a lot of people can relate to this, where they show up and they say, get on the boat, you're going to war. And kind of got taken to Korea and forced to fight, right? So after that, he came back, obviously survived, and they gave him a opportunity to attend school, right? So he chose some of the best schools in the country, went and put in his time at those schools, Ivy League schools like Syracuse and Dartmouth and things like that, and got his doctorate from OSU. So he created sort of these like really big shoes for people to fill, right? Kind of coming in behind him.
Yeah, for sure.
Not really a lot of room for us to complain about our situation, you know? So in that time, though, there was always a creative aspect to his life. He was always painting, or he taught himself how to read and write music, taught himself how to play the piano, things like that. And so when we would go visit them during the summer, the house is just filled with all these different paintings. And instead of, things like, instead of him getting senior portraits done by a photographer, he would do charcoal drawings of the kids, or pastel renderings, or oil paintings and things like that. So I kind of grew up with that stuff on their walls and would ask questions about it. Out of all the grandkids, I think I was the only one that they would ever let touch the piano, because it was like this sacred thing. It's a really expensive, big instrument. It's kind of hidden off to the side in a different room where you don't really touch things. They're like those old school grandparents where there's an entire
the whole room dedicated
second living room.
Yeah,
you know what I mean?
There's the front room and the second room. You can't sit in that room.
That's
You're
right.
supposed to look at it.
That's right. Yeah,
like you never sit in there.
yeah.
Let me catch you in that front room. And you
exactly
always wanted to
right.
go in there. You don't know why. It's just like
what's so intriguing, right? Like it was so different. Like going to visit them, because my grandmother's Italian, my grandfather's Puerto Rican, and there's a huge like cultural aspect that they were sort of imprinting on us that I wasn't getting with my mom, who's of German and Native American descent, right? Like they're just white people. But when I went to my grandparents' house, here's like pictures of the rainforest, like, people of color on the walls. Like I don't know who these people were, or like where any of that was coming from. So I would ask questions. I was super curious about it, right? And there's sort of like this musical difference too, like I'd never heard any of the music that they would play. Things like it was all in Spanish, like Spanish guitar, a lot of classical music, things like that. So that stuff was endlessly intriguing for me. And they had books, they had encyclopedias and all these wonderful things. And like during the summer, we would go to the library and stuff like that. And those aren't things that I would do with the other side of my family. Not to discredit them or anything, but like I drew intrigue and curiosity from those things that were completely foreign to me.
Makes sense.
You know?
Yeah. And sounds like to an extent like your grandparents saw that in you and they tried their best to kind of
Yeah.
nourish that. And they're like,
Yeah,
hey.
they really did.
Yeah.
In a lot of ways, they definitely encouraged us to be makers and to put pen to paper, and like instead of like watching TV or video games, it was always like, here's a pad of paper and some stamps or like blocks, or you know what I mean. It was like things that you were actively participating in rather than like passively kind of observing. And if that was an element to a visit, there was a conversation that went alongside of that, and like they generally wanted to know what we thought about certain things, and we would talk about the cultural differences here that they were experiencing, or and they were both teachers too. So this cultural thing is always sort of a theme with them, right? Like it's just different. They're like deeply religious, but they're both Catholic, obviously. So that's a big part of it too, and like that's what poor people do, like they indulge in culture because that's something that's available to them. At least for my grandparents, my grandfather coming from Puerto Rico, I mean, he didn't see a car until he was 8. He remembers his first ride in a car. Like I don't remember that because I was brought home
in a car, yeah,
from the hospital in a car.
Makes sense.
You know what I mean? And things like that. So, coming from a place where you're literally building your own house to where we are now, I was infinitely intrigued about his early life and sort of the things that he had to go through as somebody that came to the States, didn't speak English, didn't have the education that people, the educational opportunities that people had here. So it was just so different, and that was interesting to me. I was always interested in things that were different than what I was surrounded by, Do
you feel like it drew you, or maybe just somehow like, innately, like I know it's something else that's inside of me, like I'm supposed to be like in a different place or a different environment?
Yeah, always. So I grew up in Wayne National Forest in southern Perry County, and that's like, that's Hillbillyville down there. You know what I mean? No disrespect to those people. They love it. They're proud of it, and they should be. I mean, it's a whole thing kind of like unto itself, and that's great. But there was something about it that never quite fit for me, like my last name was Torres. That's a big difference from like Jones or, whatever,
Sure. Yeah. Miller. You can think of
Miller, I went to Miller High School,
Oh.
you know what I mean? Stuff like that,
Yeah.
So it was like made clear to me whether or not I wanted it to be, that there was something different about who I was, and I didn't know that really, it's not inherent. You're just kind of like living day to day, like going to school and doing the things that you do, and then suddenly, like once you get to a certain age, people kind of start asking questions about who you are and where you come from. That was a hard question to answer, and like once those differences started to be made clear for me, it was like, okay, maybe I don't really fit here. Like my interests are different. Like I don't like this music. I don't particularly love this food. I don't like having my shoes be muddy all the time. Like it's like stuff like that. I didn't like being dirty.
Yeah.
And when you grow up in a place like that, it's just mud everywhere and like lime. And this particular place, there was a lot of what they call coal slack all over the place because it's a coal mining town. And coming from, those summers with my grandparents and understanding those differences, looking at sort of where I was living, I knew that I didn't want to be there. I always felt like I belonged in a city or at least a town of like, a considerable population. And I don't know. I always knew that wasn't where I wanted to be. So ever since then, I've been trying to get to the city. And, I finally landed in Columbus, I think, probably around 2011. And it's just felt right since then,
Yeah, I love Columbus now. And, we've had multiple conversations. After certain situations happen, I was like, I don't know how long I'm going to stay here. I'm going to be here. But, I've just fallen in love with the city, like the community, and it's like literally just embrace it. It's city enough, but it's not too city.
Yeah, I agree with that.
It's like a perfect balance. And one thing, I was talking with a friend the other day. Columbus to me is one of the cities of the future, not because of like the smart city grant or anything like that.
Right.
I see all different types of people and groups of people working together.
Yeah.
And trying to work together for the common cause or like a common goal.
Yeah.
And you are heavily involved in the creative community, the arts community in Columbus. And how has all those different things, like, I guess kind of how it started, and then how has, things from your past and things that your grandparents had taught you and that you saw kind of how those all wrapped in and brought it together?
Sure. Well, I think maybe something that you're kind of dancing around here is the value of education and awareness, right? Like that was something that was always kind of pressed on me by them. So I took that everywhere that I went. You know, every town that I lived in before I got to Columbus, there was always some aspect of like, this place doesn't fit me or some of the people that I'm involved with, and there's sort of a gap here. So how can we fill that gap in a positive and constructive way? Mm-hmm. And that's something that I've always carried with me, right? Like, how can we make our situation better with mm-hmm. the tools that we have available to us? I've always been fascinated by limitations, which is why I think I'm so strongly drawn to design. Is that like, you know, here's a certain very strict set of limitations that you have to operate within. How do you fix something with just these things that are available to you? So by the time I get here, there are certain opportunities that I've found myself able to contribute to, certain issues that I think that my skill set specifically can help fix. So I think I've always been the type of person to seek out problems to solve, mm-hmm. Or at least start conversations and see how I can help. You know, and that takes a lot of different forms.
So, speaking of like, you know, just with everything that's going on in the world, it's a lot of stuff.
Yeah.
Like, man, the past week, we had bombs being sent. We got synagogues being shot up. Yeah. We got grocery stores. It's getting closer to, you know, election time, and like, you know, what are we supposed to do at this point? You know, that's like one of those things. Because it seems like, you know, we're kind of making stride and we're kind of making progress. And the arts community, definitely for sure, we've been creating a lot of different things, trying to keep people together and bring the world together. The more things tend to try and divide us or separate us, is, you know, what are we supposed to do now at this mm-hmm. point? It's a very interesting place. I really feel we're back in the 60s again, but in a different place. We just got more visibility, more technology, and a little bit more money. Yeah. But it's the same.
I think that given the way that things are right now, I think that people should keep in mind, and this is what I personally think, that like things are never as bad as you think, and things are maybe sometimes worse than you might think too. You know what I mean? Like we sort of live somewhere between those two extremes. And I think like these negative or really nasty things that are happening now are they're things that have always happened in different ways. They've taken different forms, but we're more aware of them now. Mm-hmm. And our sensitivity to these issues fluctuates as well. You know, I mean, there's some things that I see happen on both sides of these very controversial conversations that'll kind of linger around for a while. And then other things that I think could kind of, I know I'm being vague here, but other things that I think should stay around don't. And it's kind of like mind-blowing to me how those things, where and when we choose to place the importance of those things. You know what I mean? I think that the media has a big role in that. I think politics have a big role in that. I think social media has a big role in that. And honestly, I think that and I'm guilty of this too, I think that people tend to focus on the wrong things I think we end up spinning our wheels a lot more than we would like, or than we think when we contribute to something, that it's going to have this huge impact. It's like the straws thing, right? Like that's a nice, safe topic that we can talk about, right? Yeah. Straws, like we're going to ban straws. Like It seems important, but how important is that on the scale of, the other things that are happening out there? Like to me, there are way bigger issues that we need to address. Systemic issues too, you know?
For sure.
Social issues that are way more important than this. I think that stuff, I think that in a lot of ways, it's a distraction from the actual issues. And like, yeah, it's important. It's its own thing. I'm not saying like, you know, let the sea animals like choke on straws. That's obviously important that they don't. But at the same time, like, you know, there are real issues that we're facing every day on a much more like, I guess, like impactful level, right? Like a more meaningful level.
Sure. No, for sure.
Like the dynamic of like going down to the store, going down to Turkey Hill, and like, how do you feel about going down there? How do I feel about going down there? Is that a problem? You know, it's like, Okay, if it is, like, what's the issue?
Mm-hmm.
You know?
Yeah.
And like, why aren't these problems being solved? As opposed to these companies that are trying to make you feel better or make you feel worse by blaming you for the demand of straws. Like, how fucking important is that? I don't know if we can cuss on here.
I mean, yeah, we can definitely do that.
I don't know how important that is. You know? I just see other things that are happening here that are more important than that.
So that kind of pivots to the overall, like, as a creative in doing design, design is used for marketing.
Yeah.
I was talking to Richie, matter of fact, a couple of weeks ago. Just as far as a creative, do you feel that it is, like your like your duty to use, your art and your creativity to shine light on what's going on?
That's a good question. I think there is a spectrum there, and I think some people, it's like a slider, you know what I mean? Like, some people choose to use their talents and abilities, skills, whatever you want to call it, to shed light on certain situations like that. And some people choose not to, and it's like it could almost be more of like a expression or entertainment. And I think if the right opportunity were to come across my desk or to present itself in the right place, then yeah, absolutely. I mean, the work that I've done in the past for specific nonprofit institutions here in town, and sort of outside of Columbus as well, I have to really believe in the things that they're doing in order to attach my name to it. Like, I have a very strong ethical sense of like what I think is right and what I think is wrong, and I definitely know that what we do can be used for good or for evil. And it's anybody's opinion on what that actually means for them. But I would never intentionally attach myself to something that I didn't believe in if I knew that it could harm other people.
So as a business owner and like trying to grow, like I'm pretty sure there's been certain opportunities, like financially, it's probably been like this is a great opportunity.
Yeah.
But there's that conflict. So how are you how are you able to kind of like weed? You just, regardless of whatever, just like, no, I'm just not gonna do it.
Yeah, I think that that's where like the whole like trust your gut thing comes in, right? And you know when it's against your ethics or your principles and when you don't, because if you're questioning it that hard, then it's probably not going to be within your ethical boundaries, right? And there have been things that I have done where I was unsure about that. And I think that everybody has to test those lines and like, walk up to those lines and figure out like,
For sure.
is this okay for me to do? It's like political work, you know what I mean? Like, full disclosure here, I've done political work on both sides. And I just don't want to do it. I just don't like taking the things that I have and knowing that if I produce something that's really amazing for one side or the other and that ends up hurting people,
yeah,
then it's just like, all I did was like design this thing. But like,
it's bigger than that.
there's a snowball effect that can happen. And I don't know, man. Like, the whole like left and right thing is like not something that I'm super on board with anyway. You know what I mean? Like, not to get too deep into my own personal political beliefs here, but like I think that there are more on the ground level things that I can use my abilities for that help people now, help people immediately. They it can start conversations. It can call out the elephant in the room. At the very least, it can help change perspective for certain people within a community. Marshall Shorts always says that it's about exposure. Like, that's the first step, right? And I love that. It's so good. And I think that that's a really, I mean, you could call it like on the fence, right? But like at the same time, like, you're still educating people and you're still helping to open their eyes or shift perspective on something. That exposure, I think, is really important. That's kind of where I think I would rather live, is like showing people like, look, whatever side you're on, if we have to look at it that way, there are options for you beyond what is expected within your limitations, right? Within your world. There are things beyond that. So that's why I'm always willing to have a conversation about my work or about the things that I've done that have impacted people either positively or negatively.
To date, what has, to you, I don't know if this is a fair question to ask. What do you feel like has been probably one of the most impactful projects? And what I mean by impact, I mean as far as like it had an impact on your life, like as a whole. Like you just like, you know what, like I'm so happy. Like this is. It wasn't about the financial gain from it. It wasn't. It was that lasting impact.
Yeah, we did a mural last year. It was the one over on Main Street here in Columbus, near on the east side, going from downtown into Bexley. And it says, they tried to bury us, but they didn't know we were seeds. And then the whole thing is like sort of surrounded by all this like overgrown flora.
Mm-hmm.
It's like all these like plants and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And that was, I mean, easily, without a doubt. And I knew it sort of in the middle of that project that was the most impactful project that I'd ever been a part of. Because here we have this organization that's in an impoverished neighborhood, you know, and I had my own perceptions of that place before I started working, you know, on that project at that location.
Mm-hmm.
It was an organization that's just one of many within that building, called Leader Spark, and what they do is they teach soft leadership skills to impoverished youth, and it gets a lot more complicated than that, but as a summary, that's what they do, and they really sort of are like a on the ground level kind of organization, right? And there are all these other like there's a mosque inside of this building, and like a band practices in there, and there's access to like audio and media equipment and stuff. It's really cool, actually. And there used to be some like slight or like simple medical offerings there too, services. Okay. But you know, it's a community hub. I mean, it's called the hub, right? So we get asked to design this mural and really kind of show, and the purpose of it was to show that there is life here, despite all of the things that you kind of see around. You know, there are like all these like condemned buildings, and
there's like old art auto shops and everything along that street, abandoned buildings, and
and I think that it like that creates a perception. And it's probably fair to look at those things and say like, this is maybe not a great neighborhood to walk through at whatever time of day or whatever. I understand why people think that, because I had that perception too, you know. And like after interviewing Kay Wilson, I think is her name, the leader of this organization, she said, you know, this is, people speed through here and they don't stop, and they think it's this and it's actually not, and we want to show them that, you know, there are things happening here, and that's the purpose of this mural. So like I knew when she said that we were doing something more than just creating a nice piece of design here. You know, it was like, we have to send a message to the people of this community and to the people that come through here, because it's a highly trafficked road, right?
For sure.
And you know, she said people are speeding through, and we just really want to connect with people, even if it's for a second. I said, okay. So then we went away. We came back with this design, and she cried when she saw it. And we knew that we had something there, right? So the whole thing was designed to get, you know, like as a giant paint by numbers. And so we had some of the kids from the community come in, and their parents came out. We got to have these really great conversations. I'm sort of directing after we had got the initial like stencil up for everything, you know. You know, and I'm just talking to some of the parents and some of the kids, and you know, after a certain point, it's like they kind of hand it off to me, and I finish it up and clean it up and like get all the stuff that they can't reach off of a ladder. You know, we had a lift out there and everything, and because this thing is huge. It's like
I know. It's
15 feet high by like 50 feet wide or something. It's just massive. It took 2 weeks to paint, and it was cold.
Yeah, I remember when I was done, I was like,
it was like this time of year that we were out
I
doing
was
that.
like, oh man. Julie was out there the other day, and I was like, I'm taking some coffee, and it wasn't as bad, but it was cold that day.
But it was totally worth it, because you know, at that time, you know, these falls have gotten a lot more mild recently, and so there were a couple of nice days, and as I'm out there painting, people would stop. Young people, old people, middle-aged people, I mean everybody. Someone would come by, ask questions, ask how, you know, what is this thing, what's it about, like who's inside the building, blah blah blah, whatever. And those were the moments that really stuck out to me, because I got to interact with people that I otherwise would not have gotten a chance to interact with. And some of those, and I'm not going to get too much into the details here, but like there were a few specific interactions where I had misread something, and it was sort of made clear to me once that boundary was broken, that the way that I perceive certain people at certain times is completely incorrect.
Mm-hmm.
So the value of that for me was far beyond like the compensation that I got for painting the actual mural, right? And there's just so many stories that come from that specific project that are similar to that in terms of like, I mean, just look at the area, right? Like I thought it was like kind of this dead thing, but if you just pause and you spend 2 weeks, if you pause for just a moment and you see the people that are coming in and out, the types of people that are coming in and out, I mean, these are wonderful people. And in my case, if you stand there and pause for 2 weeks, then you get a completely different viewpoint on that area and see that it actually is full of life and that there is a thriving community there. And there are all of these different things that are happening that are incredible. And to me personally, the value of that is it's uncomparable to the money.
Yeah.
So yeah, it was a great piece of design that we put up there for him, and it was cool. It's fun to look at. It looks great, but like the story of the community and getting close to the people that work there and being at the unveiling and just all the hands and the hearts and the heads that went into this thing are just, I mean, it changed everything. It changed everything for me.
So what's next for Studio Frieght?
What's next for Frieght? We're trying to figure that out, man. We're in the middle of all that right now. I think being smarter about the way that we're operating, being smarter about the way that we're putting ourselves out into the world, being more intentional with our business decisions that include, who we're helping when we're choosing to help them. We've had these like really intense conversations lately about what you need to be willing to do as a business owner, right? And I told my business partner, I was like, I don't think that we're good at taking advantage of people. And I think that like, if in a lot of cases in business, like the people that are good at that thrive really well. And we're just not thriving well because we're too good at people to like get one over on other people. You know what I'm saying?
Yeah. Is there a balance for that? Is there such things?
Right,
How do you balance getting over on people? Is this a negative connotation?
I mean, it's like basic capitalism, right? Like you need to be able to sell something more for,
But maybe it's knowing your value though. But like, it's you still like, I mean, cause y'all do like amazing work.
Oh, thank you.
And I mean, no one knows how large Frieght really is.
Right.
And but you guys move like it's a full-fledged army. And there are other companies I know here in Columbus, design companies, that have a lot more people.
Yeah.
And the output is nowhere near.
I feel like we're slow. I mean, that's like part of it though, right? Is always trying to grow in our skill set and what we're able to offer to people. And that's the thing that makes it really difficult, right? Like we don't want to take advantage of people. We want to work with people to give them the things that they deserve, but we also still deserve to be paid too. You know what I mean?
For sure.
Whereas like you look at, like I was saying earlier and massively screwed up, was that like in capitalism, you need to be able to sell something for more than what you have to pay for it. And it just like feels wrong to take advantage of people like that. So maybe, I don't know. I think value is, that's the next big piece of the conversation, is talking about value and like what are the things that we value and how much actual value does that have in terms of money?
For sure.
So is it doing more work like the Hub? Is it doing more stuff like Roosevelt? I mean, these are organizations that we believe in, and we think that they're actually on the ground doing this work that is important. There's a social justice component of it. There's a poverty relief component of it. Those things are important to us. Those are, part of bigger principles that we have at Frieght, namely education, right? It's a big principle that's unmovable for us, is the education aspect of it. It's why I teach.
Mr. Torres.
Yes. Can't call me Mr. T though.
No, Mr. T. No, Mr. T.
I try to make that joke and they're too young. They don't get it.
They didn't get. What subject are you teaching? Shout out to CCAD.
What subject am I teaching?
Yes,
it's called Design Lab. It's a sophomore class. So as they're coming out of a class called visual literacy and their foundations of their first year, this is like one of the first classes that they take where we take some of the basics that they've learned, and then kind of elevate their skills, start to bring a little bit of concept into it, and refine workflow and things like that. Yeah.
You just kind of stumbled into it?
Well, I wouldn't say that.
Did you intentionally say it? Did you just like, you know what?
Well, I mean, teaching is something that I've always wanted to do. Because like I came into CCAD myself as a non-traditional student, meaning that I came in older, right? And like already had a degree. So I'd already had experience too. And when I was in school, people would sort of gravitate towards me because I was somebody that could get certain things done in terms of like workflow or whatever. So I would teach them, and I had a couple buddies be like, you should teach, like you're so good at explaining this. And I was like, I don't know. But it was always kind of in the back of my mind, you know, because I just love design so much. And I really have a strong affection for CCAD. Obviously, it's my alma mater. And two different people actually at the same time had approached me and said, hey, I was wondering if you wanted to take over my spot as an adjunct instructor. I think that you'd be good for this. Would you want to do it? And I said, yeah, I would. So I reached out, and one of the positions had already been taken, but this other one was open. So I got on boarded that way.
It's pretty cool.
Yeah, it was simple, but it was simple to get on, but actually being there day to day is a little more difficult, right? Like there's a bit of an age gap, and so their culture is a little bit different from mine. So I try to be open to all of that stuff, but my jokes aren't as funny as they maybe would have been a couple years ago, which is fine. But being on the other side of that desk has been an interesting experience, to say the least. I mean, you're managing all of these personalities, right? Like all these different, and everybody has their own things that they're kind of bringing with them, and you're just kind of trying to teach them Photoshop and Adobe Illustrator, So it's good, man. It's a good challenge. It's tough, but it's good. I've learned a lot about myself and leading people since I started doing this.
What was it like being a non-traditional student, like going back to school, being a little bit older, going back to school? That's like honestly, even myself, that's I don't want to be as a fear. It's a little bit of an apprehension.
Sure. Well, I think anytime you go in a setting where you're different like that, like you feel like people notice. It's like you're wearing a bright orange T-shirt or something. I don't know. I think the truth is, like, most people don't care as much as you think they do. But there are some differences, right? Like my biggest challenge there was like fitting in culturally with the other students, because they just have a whole different set of like I had my own apartment and stuff, and a lot of them were still living on campus. But I would say, like, overall my mindset going in was a little bit different, I think, than most of them. So I was so focused on getting something more out of that, because it was the second time that I had been to college. You know what I mean? So I was way more focused on doing better and getting a lot out of it. Whereas, like, I think a lot of students in their first time in undergrad are like, oh, I have to go to school and I have to do this homework. And I'm like, I'm trying to, like, make things happen for myself. Like, I'm just going to absorb as much as I can, which meant that, like, I was trying to build really solid relationships with instructors and, like, pick their brains as much as I could. And, like, all these kids coming out of high school, they look at that as like you being a teacher's pet or something. Yeah. You have no idea. Like,
I'm trying to I'm an adult now.
Right.
Like, this life is real now. You'll figure it out.
It's so much more real. And, like, you can think whatever high school shit you want to think. Like, I'm here for me. And that's the difference, I think, is like a lot of people go into college young and think like, oh, this is like the next thing that you do. Or it's like what my family wants or whatever. And I was really there for myself. And I think that, that mindset led me to where I am now.
And when you first went to school, what did you study?
What did I study? Is digital media design. So pretty much the same thing, but it was at a small tech school out in Newark, Ohio. It was less intense. It's sort of like a more general, very broad introduction to like a lot of digital tools, right? So there's a video component to it and an audio component to it, 3D modeling and animation, things like that, a little bit of like graphic design. And at that time, coming out of that school, I chose to focus on graphic design because I originally started out wanting to do video.
Really?
Yeah.
I can see that. Are we gonna get some more Frieght videos soon?
Yeah, for sure.
Like, cause you know I'm ready for them.
Yeah, there's more coming in terms of like the kind of content that we're going to be producing. That's sort of like what we're trying to finish out the whole year with. You asked what was next for Frieght. That's a piece of it. It's just we want the studio to start producing content rather than just like building content for other people.
For sure.
Excuse me. So, sorry.
No, you're fine.
So, I think.
Yeah, it's just slowly making its way.
Yeah. So that's a big thing that's next is us producing our own content and figuring out exactly what that looks like for us, you know, because we don't want to be a Me Too studio where we're kind of putting out the same kind of stuff that other people are. We want to figure out what works for us, and the whole, you know, last quarter of this year is figuring that stuff out. So yeah, you're gonna see more videos and a bunch of other types of content too. As we kind of get further along in this thing, our abilities and our resources are growing too.
For sure.
You know?
Yeah.
So we're building right now, you know, kind of under the surface.
Yeah.
And we've been a little quiet this year.
Uh-huh.
But part of that is like doing the work, you know, from a design point of view, from a business point of view, but also like, okay, we have a lot of opportunities that we're not taking advantage of because we're making all this stuff, and we should be sharing like how we're making that with people too. You know?
For sure.
Yeah.
Yeah. And I think that's like the value of like teaching. I was telling Elle, because of course we have like, you know, the specific lane that we do or whatever for B.O.B. But I told him, I said, I want to start teaching people, like, even if something simple as putting together a podcast. Like anybody can do a podcast. Like, I'll show you how to put together a podcast. It's very simple. And just giving people value. And people need that. People appreciate that more. You can never go wrong with education. Definitely appreciate you taking time out.
Yeah, of course. I appreciate you asking me.
You know, stopping and chopping it up with me.
Your place is dope too.
Oh, well, thank you. You know, I try to, you know, I want it to be more of a live work studio than anything else.
Yeah, I respect that. That's how we started.
Well, yeah, and you know, and that's, I'm getting more to the point because as I've been recording these podcasts at my crib for the most part, but probably gonna have to get a bigger place now too, because there's more content that we're gonna be recording and doing, and I just need the space to do it. So instead of doing office space, just double it up. Before we finish, whenever I ask somebody this question, everybody's like, "Oh, that's a hard question." Top 5. Okay, your favorite 5 hip hop albums.
Oh.
It can be jazz. It can be jazz or hip hop. Because the first thing, the one that comes to my mind is going to be Madlib Shades of Blue. So I just had to. It can just be albums. I won't even say hip hop. I won't even limit it to genre.
We have to limit it to genre because we'll be here all night.
See, that's why I tried. Then it's just like, then I did jazz. But then like Madlib is kind of jazz, but it's also hip hop at the same time.
Can I just give you like 5 of my all time favorite hip hop albums? Like,
yes.
In no particular order.
No particular order.
I cannot pin down.
No particular order.
I can't pin down 5 all time. Like, you know.
It's a
in order.
Yeah.
I can't. The number one I don't think exists. Okay, so the number one thing that comes to mind, the first one rather, not the number one, the first one that comes to my mind is Low End Theory by Tribe Called Quest. The way Excursions, man, the way that album opens is just incredible. Everybody likes Midnight Marauders.
No,
Everybody loves that album, but I love the Low End Theory, man. The album artwork, the sound. It's awesome. It's so good.
And then whenever I see Low End Theory, I always remember, especially Excursions, because you remember the different colors, the red and black from the video, and then boom, 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 boom,
that
boom,
jazz
boom.
sample.
Yes,
and
I was just like,
so
in the days when I was a teenage. And then you remember A-Life had the T-shirt. They made the special edition Tribe Called Quest T-shirt, and it had the lyrics to Excursion on there.
I've never seen that.
If I can find it like that, I'm going to NY. I may have to try and go a little vintage shopping. Finally doing it.
Yeah, man, Tribe is just, oh God. That's some of the best music ever made.
For sure.
This is unreal. The period that it was made is perfect.
For sure.
It doesn't really get much better than that in my opinion. It was like the perfect storm, right?
Mm-hmm.
And I'm an East Coast guy. Like I love the East Coast stuff, right? So that's not to say that the West Coast stuff is bad. I don't know. Whatever. Number 2, probably Mad Villainy, Madlib, and MF Doom.
Okay.
mastery. I mean, that whole thing. Like there are really great stories from how that album was conceived. Like they were living in the same house together, but never worked together.
With
like
peanut butter. That's
MF Doom would work like I think through the day, and Madlib worked at night, and like one of them lived in the basement, the other lived in the attic, and like they just never crossed paths, but somehow created like one of the most iconic albums of all time.
For sure.
Amazing album. And like there's a bunch of remixes on that stuff too. Fortet, who's a producer.
I have that on vinyl.
Dude, it's so
I have
good.
that one on.
So
I have the
good.
Henchman and I have the Fortet one on vinyl. I got that one at Stinkweeds in Phoenix, at Vinyl Record Shop.
That's awesome. Man, that's such a good. It's like probably the best like remixes of that album I've ever heard. It's so awesome. You know what though? Like I have to bring this up. Like this is, and even though I love Mos Def, have you ever heard like his cover of Mad Villainy?
I haven't heard his cover of it.
It's so bad. Out of all of the stuff that Mos Def has done, like Black on Both Sides is also like an amazing album. I don't know if it's on my top, but like that's an amazing album. And I love Mos Def, but like that is not. He kind of like put the whole thing out as like this masked rapper. Like, who is this guy? You know what I mean? It was like pretty
persona type thing.
Yeah. And it was like pretty obvious that it was him because like if you were a fan of his music at all, like you know his voice.
Yeah.
And I just could not believe like what it was. Man.
Was he trying to Quasimodo it a little bit?
I don't know. Quasimodo's dope.
I had to go back. I was just thinking the other day. I was like, man, I'm gonna go back and listen to Quasimodo. I was like, oh.
Yeah. Anyway, yeah, I don't know. That aside, let's see. So we got Low End Theory, Mad Villainy. We were just listening to the third one on the list, which easily has to be The Score by the Fugees. I mean, that's just, it's so timeless.
Yeah, that is a timeless one.
We were going through this like list of hip hop samples, and it's got just like all this great stuff on there. It's got like that Michael McDonald sample from Regulators, Warren G. You know what I'm talking about? It's like that dope keyboard, that E keyboard that comes in. I love like listening to sources from samples and stuff, and just like comparing it and like listening to what the producer did, just like kind of a hobby.
They'll grab little nuances, like why would, and then they'll it's the one loop, and it'll just be this over, and it's
Dilla, right? Dilla, that's what he would do. He would find these little things that like you would overlook in like an Isley Brothers song or something, and then like make that the main motif in an entire song. I'm like, man, I never even heard that piece. Until Dilla brings it to my attention. You know. So yeah, they do that wonderfully in
Lightworks.
In
just
the
had to throw it out there.
Dude, donuts.
Like how's this?
That's got to be number 4 for me is Donuts. But before I get to that, The Score by the Fugees, they beautifully blend all that stuff together. The influences on that album are incredible. Lauryn Hill was like fucking 21 when they did that. Like, that is unreal. Like, talent on that album. And it still holds up so well. And I feel like that's like a key piece to a timeless album, or like a best of all time, is that you can listen to it in 2018 and it doesn't feel like the Fresh Prince and DJ Jazzy Jeff, which that stuff is awesome, but it just so totally feels like 1987.
For sure.
And I love that for its own reasons. You know what I mean? But The Score, you can turn anybody onto that and they would be like, that is an amazing album. And it doesn't sound like it's just straight from 1996 or whenever it was made. I can't remember. So that's 3. Number 4 would have to be Donuts by Jay Dilla. I mean, it's not I guess it's a hip hop album, but it's an instrumental.
Oh yeah, I mean, I count it like Light My Fire's on there.
It was his last one. He made it on his deathbed. You know, he died from this like rare blood disease, I think. So he had to have his mom come and get or bring him his tools, and which are now in the Smithsonian, by the way. Did you know that?
I have to get to
like his MPC and like his Moog and all that stuff is in the Smithsonian. She donated all that stuff. His mom was a huge supporter of his work. I love Dilla so much because he was like such an under the radar kind of guy, right? Like he was like producing stuff for like Janet Jackson, and like all these huge like titans of industry sort of, but like he was just about the music, and he was like so meticulous about the way that he categorized things and he organized things. He was just a true master.
And he was an ill rapper too.
Yeah,
he can get busy on the mic. Him and Madlib, that was. I think to a certain extent that kind of affected Madlib.
Oh, absolutely. Well, because here's this dude on the other side of the country, and they're having conversations with albums.
Yeah.
And at one point, I don't know if you ever saw that. I think it's the Stone's Throw
Oh yeah, I
documentary.
own that one. Yeah, for
where
sure.
Madlib's like, I felt like he was talking to me.
Directly, yeah, to me.
You
Like,
know?
where's this guy? Yeah.
Yeah.
So when they finally got together, and it was
J-Lib.
just, it was
Yeah.
just like this, and
Yeah.
and it made sense.
Yeah, it was perfect, dude. I'm so like happy that both of those people exist.
Oh yeah, for sure.
And like even the stuff that Madlib does, it's like a little bit more under the radar, like the trip to Brazil, trip to India, like that stuff, man.
It reminded me of Quincy.
Oh yeah,
Like I
have
think
you seen the Quincy
doc
on
I've
Netflix?
watched it.
Oh my god, dude. Okay, listen. So I'm a big MJ fan, but like, I didn't know that I was an MJ fan of the stuff that Quincy did.
Yeah, it was Quincy.
It was dude.
You love Quincy. You think
yeah,
you love him. You
yeah,
think
yeah,
you love
yeah.
MJ off the wall, and then like
dude, off the wall.
That's my favorite
Goosebumps right now.
Same. Favorite Michael Jackson.
So like as we're going through and learning, like he was on this and he was on that. I was like, that's my favorite shit.
Frank
That's my
Sinatra.
favorite
Oh
shit.
yeah, and it's
That's
like
my favorite shit. Like it's just
the
Quincy.
bossa nova. Do.
Yeah.
Like,
yeah, it's nuts.
It's Quincy.
Dude, Quincy. I mean, like I always knew that he was such a big influence, but I didn't know it was like. I mean, he found Oprah. I mean, that's just game over.
Think about how many like in his life continue to affect more and more people. Like that's he's still going.
Yeah.
Still going.
So all right, number 5.
Yeah, 5.
Number 5. I mean, this is tough because there's so many good ones, right? Like The Miseducation of Lauryn Hill, Entered the 36 Chambers.
Ooh, Tiger Style.
I know. God, what else is there? Like, I just want to rattle off a couple. Oh, License to Ill. I mean, that's just like these dudes were 17 when they put that out. I mean, it changed everything. It's so dated though. Like that's my only thing. I still love that record.
But the 808s though still hit.
The 808s are so good.
Still
and the influence that had was like so undeniable.
Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? It's like here these 3 Jewish kids from New York and they just changed hip hop.
Yeah.
It was awesome. Like
and it was just raw. It was like
it was
the pure
super
raw, just pure.
I mean,
pure
that's like
sound of New York. Like that's why when people hear those things, they automatically tie it to the sound of like New York. They want that New York sound.
Yeah, for sure. Well, that's Rick Rubin on that too.
For sure.
You know what I mean?
That old school Def Jam feel.
Yeah, old school Def Jam. I feel like he was just so pivotal in that. Obviously.
Mm-hmm.
God, I don't know. I have all these like different albums running through my head, but I feel like I got to put the nail in the coffin and say "To Pimp a Butterfly" by Kendrick Lamar. Everybody might want to say "damn" on this, but I'm gonna tell you why it's "To Pimp a Butterfly" for me. So when I first got hip to Kendrick and was listening to Section 80 and Good Kid, Mad City, I was unbelievably just like floored by the narrative, by the production, by the rawness of it, the unique quality, because like this thing that tends to happen in rap specifically, and I specifically use rap as opposed to hip hop, because like what happens in rap is like there's so much like cannibalism and style and technique. True. Like for as talented as Mike Will is, like it's like kind of what everybody's doing. You know what I mean? And when I heard Swimming Pools for the first time, it was like this club song, right? And I was on a photo shoot and one of the photographers threw it on. I'd never heard it before. And I kind of came into Kendrick late, right? And I'd never heard it before. And it was just the tone, it was so dark. And it was so like, that minor tonality in there. And like he's kind of whispering to you. Yeah. You know what I mean?
He's like having that conversation.
And the way that it builds, and then the end, when it goes into that last part of that track, I was like, man, and I kind of embarrassingly like pulled my friend off to the side. I was like, what is this? And he was like, it's Kendrick. And I was like, I don't know what that is. So I looked into it and I listened to it, and that's on Good Kid, Mad City, right? And I listened to that album and stuff like Backseat Freestyle. And just, oh my God, dude, that whole album, I couldn't believe it. I'd never heard anything like that before. And I've been a big fan of hip hop and rap for a long time. And the things that always strike me are things that are so unique and just different from what everybody else is doing. And I just never heard anything like that. It was so good. And his voice is so cool. And like, he does like the soulful thing really well. You know what I mean? ADHD and like his collaborations at that time. Rigor Mortis.
Oh my, Rigor Mortis. When
Ethnicity, all that stuff. Like, it's so good. Like the sample choices were cool and like super offbeat. Like he was sampling stuff from like indie bands and all this like under the radar stuff. And he was kind of under the radar at that time. And then, I mean, Good Kid, Mad City just blew me away. Couldn't believe it. And then went back and listened to Section 80, and then like some of the other collaborations and stuff he was doing with TDE and like Ab Soul and Danny Brown and what was the other one? There's another guy out there that he does stuff with.
Schoolboy Q.
Schoolboy Q.
Isaiah
That's right.
Rashad,
Yeah,
J-Rock.
That's the big one. Yeah, J-Rock. Yeah. Oh yeah. So I'm like, okay, this guy is like, he's connected to some awesome dudes. Like he's kind of has one foot in the underground and like one foot in the mainstream. Like we'll see what he does. And I was having a conversation with somebody, and we were big Kendrick fans. You know, we listened to Good Kid, Mad City like late into the night working, just on repeat. You know, just kind of pouring over it, man. It's just there's so much good contrast in that album.
For sure.
It's a great narrative. It's about where he's from. I love that. Like that's where the best stuff comes from. So then To Pimp a Butterfly drops, and we fucking lose our minds over how good it is. The first listen through, I knew that I was listening to history.
1201. I was listening to it, downloaded on iTunes. Me and my brother just listened to it over and over and over. We listened to that album over and over and over and over.
Dude, my dude came to Columbus the next day after it came out because he was living out in Newark at the time, and we were gonna go get breakfast, and he was like, "Dude, I've been listening." I was like, "You what? Like you listen to this without me?" I was so mad that like we didn't get to experience it together. And there's a knowledge beat on that album. I think there's a transition. I can't remember what the song is, but it goes into Mama. You know, I can't believe I'm singing it on your podcast. That transition into that knowledge beat just knocked me over. Like I remember exactly where I was when I heard that, and like everything, dude. The George Clinton feature at the beginning, Fly Low produced, Wesley's Theory, like all that stuff.
Hearing Ron on the when Tupac. Now see, so the first listen. You know, because we just listened to it. You know, we didn't want to listen. I didn't want to look at the credits. I want to look at everything.
Yep,
so then
I do that same thing.
Listening to the last track and then hearing Tupac's voice, man, we real tear because nobody was like you weren't expecting that, and then to like have that conversation, but then it's kind of like, you know, at the same time, you kind of, you know, it really, he, you know, to me he's what, you know, he's one of the things that Tupac talked about. You know, he's, you know, he may not, you know, be the one that inspires change, but he's definitely gonna spark it.
Oh yeah, I think he is though.
Oh, for sure.
You know what I mean? Like I was arguing with a friend about Kendrick, and he was like, I think he's trying to be a voice of a generation. He's like, I just don't know. The next week, he got handed the Generation Award from the city of Compton or like the state of California or something huge, and I was like, okay. You know,
that
like
man has a Pulitzer Prize.
Yeah.
He has a Pulitzer Prize. A Pulitzer Prize.
Well, see, here's the other thing too, right? Like, just based on pure influence is the thing that made it so different for me. Like aside from the stuff that he was doing on Good Kid, Mad City, by the time you get to Pimp a Butterfly, he was pulling in funk. Everybody else was doing jazz.
And that
he
heavy
went funk with it, and I couldn't believe it. I mean, George Clinton on the opening track.
Yeah, and it wasn't a sample.
No, I know, dude, so good. So I'm a huge funk fan, and I just got blown away by that, you know. And I was like, he's a genius.
Yeah, and then it was genius. Like that. It's like that classic P-funk sound. Dude, I was like, man.
Oh my god, I'm a huge Funkadelic fan. Maggot Brain is undeniably one of the best albums ever made. Period. Sure. And so to hear all those things, all those like cool little influences. I mean, Childish Gambino did it too. He went he leaned into it way harder. Good. But like, there's so many cool funk influences on To Pimp a Butterfly, and there's obviously elements of jazz on there too, and elements of soul and all that stuff, you know. But like, here everybody is going after jazz, and there was like this revival of like boom bap stuff kind of happening around that time with like Joey Badass and like some of the stuff, like if you look at Trillmatic with the ASAP Mob and Method Man.
I love Trillmatic. Got the funky
that track.
That was people
people
still sleep on it when Method Man came in there.
Dude,
I was like,
Method crushed everybody on that track.
It reminded me of like when he came in to Bring the Pain. It was like Bring the Pain Meth type verse, and nobody. I still be pumping that. They'd be like, "Yo, is that the new Woo?" I was like, "No, this is Trillmatic. This is ASAP Mob."
ASAP, yeah. Speaking of them, man, they've done some awesome stuff.
Oh yeah.
I mean, I don't love it all. It's pretty hit or miss for me, but when it's hit, it's so good.
For sure.
ASAP Rocky's last album, Testing, was great. It's super weird, and I think that's that Odd Future influence. I mean, I could talk about this stuff all day too.
Oh yeah, I mean, you know, that's a.
But
we had to take a trip to Dayton too, to the Funk Museum.
Is that like part of like the Zap guys?
Yeah, I believe so.
Because you know they're from Dayton, right?
I didn't know they were from Dayton, but I've
learned
more. Like, I got the influence of the Midwest from my stepfather because he was from Indianapolis.
Okay.
So he listened to like a whole bunch of funk. Like my grandparents listened to funk too, but I mean like just like flat. Like that's where I learned so much about it.
People think it's all L.A. and New York.
It's Midwest.
It's the Midwest.
Like, I learned how to play bass guitar from an Ohio player, bass guitar player. That's what I learned.
That's where funk and techno came from, right? Like there's this huge, like we were kind of talking about Kraftwerk at the beginning before we started. Mm-hmm. There's a whole scene called Detroit techno, and that's like that was all like, you know, kind of the guys, you know, because funk kind of spurred off a lot of stuff, right? Hip hop and rap was part of that, and then techno was the other part of it too. Because if you really trace it back,
you got to go into house music too, and
yeah,
you got
and
Chicago.
House music,
it's like
exactly
Chicago
right.
with the house and like deep soul and like deep house.
Yeah,
that's
exactly right.
Like it's Midwest.
So like, and that happened. That the techno piece went to Detroit, and you know, Black Milk.
Yeah, for sure.
Black Milk. There's a song called Detroit's New Dance Music or something like that. It's the dopest track. But that's straight from a Detroit techno album, and like Black Milk's influence, and like his stuff is so good. Did you hear his collaboration, the Rebellion Sessions? I can't remember who he collaborated with on that. I'm gonna kick myself after this when I figure it out. But
I can't think of it off the top of my head either, but yeah, I know.
Man, the Rebellion Sessions are so good. It's just like Detroit techno hip hop inspired jazz album. Like, and I know that's like a few layers deep, but it's just so good.
It's a
and
good
then
infusion.
you go out to Minneapolis with Prince and all that, you know, and like the Ohio Players and Zapp, like all this stuff is coming out of the Midwest, and it's just like it's some of the most important, most influential music out there, and it just we get so overshadowed.
Thugs. Like Bone Thugs was heavily influenced by, you know, it's not West Coast, and that's another thing that people
original 3-6 out of Memphis and stuff like that. You know, like there's a whole, I don't know if you know, there's a whole Memphis revival thing happening right now.
Yeah, there's a big one, and you know, I'm a big fan of Moneybagg Yo as a rapper. You know, I mean, you're gonna have those. You gotta have. I won't say you got to have your trap rappers. You know, and I know the thing. What it is about Moneybagg Yo is like his whole voice. He embodies that whole Nashville, that Tennessee, that whole thing.
It's slower. I love
and
that.
even thing with like Young Dolph, and then you had, you know, and you can even contribute it to Yo Gotti because of how he would talk. It was his vernacular and the way that he was talking. And so I think that was one thing that first attracted to people. They're like, oh, he sounds different. He's still rapping on the same type of feels, but he sounds different. And so then now they're kind of able to start infusing that whole culture and then that revival.
Well, that's how the South stuff started. You know what I mean? Like, it was looser. It was more relaxed. It was like the things they were talking about was slightly different. You know, like it's just cool, man. It's cool the way that culture spreads to music like that.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, that's my top 5. Let's see, what is it? Let's do a recap. Low End Theory. The Score. Mad Villainy.
Donuts.
To Pimp a Butterfly.
Donuts.
And Donuts.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, those will forever be a part of my life. Like, there's so many great things from all of those albums. I mean, I don't remember the Low End Theory coming out, but everything else, when I first got onto it, it was just like life-changing.
For sure.
I'll be interested to get yours after this. Have you ever announced yours on here?
No, I haven't actually.
I mean, I feel like you have to now.
Yeah, now
I know we're running short on time, but
let me think. Reasonable Doubt, forever. Reasonable Doubt is gonna be one. And we're saying hip hop, right?
Yeah.
Okay, Reasonable Doubt. Mad Villainy. That's definitely on the list. Man,
it's tough, right?
This is really difficult, especially coming from somebody that has vinyls. And I'm like looking at
It's hard to put them all in your head.
Because the internet. That was.
Oh yeah.
I have to add because the internet.
What would you call "Awaken My Love"? Would you call that a hip hop album? Would you call that a funk album?
I would call it R&B and funk.
R&B and funk. All right, that's fair. It's hard to put that anywhere else in my mind.
Because it's more like a Earth, Wind, and Fire type feel to it.
Yeah.
Because it's a good infusion of both.
That and Maggot Brain.
Oh yeah, for sure.
Maggot Brain on there.
For sure.
Sorry.
No, I keep wanting to say Pinata. That's two Mad Libs, but like Freddie Gibbs and Mad Lib together is.
You listen to Freddie Gibbs' album?
Yeah, I listen to every Freddie.
What do you think about Freddie Gibbs?
I love Freddie.
I do too.
I love Freddie.
He kind of has a reputation for being a piece of shit, but like, Man, his last album was awesome.
What? No,
So fun.
Freddie is like Freddie.
Yeah.
Like, and then so he's about to drop Fetty on the 31st. He did a song with Currency and it was produced by Alchemist called Fetty.
Did you hear the song he did with MF Doom recently?
Yeah.
With the DJ Muggs production?
And you have to hear, you never listened to Pinata, have you?
I don't know.
You have to listen to Pinata. That's the album that he did with Madlib.
There's so much Madlib out there.
You have to, that one, like that should be the first introduction to have Gibbs. If that, you would never, you'd be like, every single thing.
I never even would have put him with Madlib like that.
And they're about to come out with a second one. They're about to come out with a Pinata too. This is the perfect time.
I like his voice a lot.
And but you know where he's from too? He's from the Midwest too.
Where's he from?
He's from Gary, Indiana.
He's from Gary, Indiana?
Gary, Indiana.
What the hell they do to him out there?
Gary, Indiana. That's why you have to listen to
dude,
you have to listen to Pinata. Like Pinata literally pretty much like
What's
tells
the
the whole
cover
story.
look like?
I got it. I got both. I have the instrumental and the...
Is it the one where he's like sitting on a Cadillac and it has like the tiger stripes on it?
Yes.
Yeah, I have listened to that. And I remember being like, "Damn, this is good." And then my buddy came through and he was like, "Yeah, he's like kind of a rapist though."
No, so what happened?
And I was like,
I'm gonna cut the podcast off now.
I just like the song or this.
No, so what happened was he was accused. So this lady lied on him out in some place in like Russia, and said that he raped her.
I see.
And he was on tour. He was out on tour, and then he was like in jail for like months.
In Russia?
Yes.
That's like the last place you want to go.
So then he ended up having, and then he talks about it on the song "Crushed Glass."
I see.
And so then on that song "Crushed Glass," he talks about it, and then they even did like, you know how Viceland had like the whole therapist session
with Freddie Gibbs.
Yeah, and so then he talks about that either. Yeah, and he talked about the entire experience.
I haven't really looked into him yet. I mean, it's like I have this whole list of people that I want to look into, and after listening to his latest album and like bits and pieces in the past,
going back to the Jeezy thing and Gucci Man, and how like when he originally started with them, and how like I
just really like his voice, man. Like,
his voice
pushing weight and all that stuff on the new one. Like it's just a good listen. It just has this like nice hard hit kind of thing to it.
Yeah.
You know who?
Oh, My Name Is My Name. I would have to put Pusha T.
Pusha T.
Everything is every Pusha T album, but I'm from Virginia, so I may be slightly biased. But everything is Pusha T. I don't care.
Pusha T, I think, is like he rightfully taking his place in hip hop history. Yes. He's not like a peaks guy like a Kanye or something where it's like you drop an album and it like changes shit. But like he's so consistently good that I think people are gonna look back and be like, "Damn, man, his contribution was huge."
Pusha makes music for the people he make music for sure.
Excuse me. I agree with that.
Did
you like Daytona?
I loved Daytona. I was listening to it earlier.
There's a couple. Yeah, we listened to it on Friday. I mean, not for the first time or anything, but just it's on rotation. And there's one line on that entire album that I'm like, that's a little corny. But outside of that, like, it's really solid, man. I was really pleased with that album.
I mean, and I guess it's different. Like everybody has. Well, a lot of people make playlists. There's certain music I listen to for like certain times. Okay, I'm about to go do this, or I'm about to get mindset for this, and it's just like. That anything Pusha T like he makes music for hustlers and for the trappers. Yeah. that's one of my favorite ad libs for sure. But that's the sound of like Virginia. It's the sound of home.
Yeah.
So and then when he's talking about, and I guess again that resonates with me because then he'll talk about certain places and certain things.
Where's he from? Is he from the West Coast?
Nah, he's from Virginia.
He's from Virginia?
Newport News, Virginia. That's where Cliff. Pharrell, yes, you're welcome. We gave you NERD. We gave you Pharrell. We gave you Missy. We gave you Timberland.
Missy and Timberland, they're from Virginia. Dude, when I found out they were cousins, I blew my mind. I had no idea. Because she mentions Timothy sometimes, and I'm like, who's that? And then I found out they were cousins. I was like, that's unreal. Anyway, let's keep the list going, man. I'm sorry.
What did I say?
The last one was My Name Is My Name by Pusha T.
Man. Ooh, this is...
It's tough being in the hot seat.
This is. I appreciate it, though. Man.
I don't know that we've ever had a conversation about music before. Maybe bits and pieces here and there.
Yeah, it was definitely bits and pieces. Yeah. We're going to have to extend this out to another session for sure. Man. There's so many different albums. I'm trying not to pick another Jay-Z album. I would have to say My Beautiful Dark Twisted Fantasy.
Yeah.
Because it was just a perfect album. I mean, Kanye right now. I don't support it, but I that was a beautiful album. For everybody that was attached to that album, to the entire, for the song All of the Lights alone, I don't think people understand how many individuals went into that song. Elton John is on that song. Fergie is on that song. Alicia Keys is on that song. The Dream is on that song. Of course, Kanye's on the song. But yeah. Like at the end, at the end is Elton John. You can hear Alicia Keys and Elton John in the background.
I didn't know that.
Mm-hmm.
The more that I unravel that album, the more impressed I am by it. The first time I really sat down and gave it a real, honest listen, I just couldn't believe it.
Even the short film.
I couldn't believe it. I mean, it definitely has like this status that is well deserved, very well deserved.
Oh yeah.
I don't think you'll ever be able to pull that album. I think it's like people are gonna look back at that and equate it with some of the best ever.
I would say that was his Thriller.
I would have to agree.
I would say that was his Thriller. Everything else, I'm not saying, again, I really don't give so much energy to it, but
well, it was after that Yeezus, I'm sorry.
Yes.
Yeah. When that came out,
Life Apollo.
I hated it.
It grew on me afterwards.
It grew on me super hard. I love that album.
Yeah, because then it became a thing. It's like the perfect rock and roll rebellion album.
Yeah.
That's exactly what it is. Yeah.
Unreal.
Yeah, I don't think people even
that Chief Keef joint on there with
yeah,
Justin Vernon or whatever.
Yeah, I know it's
liquor.
I can't hold my
Oh my God.
Yeah,
so
that
good.
it was it's and that's just at that time it was out of time. Like he was in a place, but then it was just like a few years later, it was just like, okay, like I'm aware I'm a wolf. Like you start to understand, but then it's even like the rest of it though. It's just
there's like an industrial like hip hop.
Yeah,
that industrial rap like aspect of it too. It's like very
Tech Nine-ish to me. It's like it was like a good punk.
You like
it was
Tech Nine?
It's like a hidden, like it ain't everything. It ain't for everybody. You know what I'm saying? It's like it's one, but I feel like. And I don't
Tech
think
Nine
people allow
has like some good influence, but overall, man, like the whole like ICP affiliation and all that stuff, man, I can't get on board with that.
I think as far as I credit him as far as him being independent and what he's done as far as independently, and I think with anything with hip hop because it's still, and I can't remember who I was having this conversation with, because it's still a younger, still the newer of the genres. Yeah, like it's still gonna expand. Like you have like alternative rock. You got, Christian rock, you got slow rock, you got, heavy metal rock, you got, industrial rock. Like, so you're going to have those different genres of hip hop. You don't have trap hip hop. You don't have like, Southern. You're going to have, I think sometimes people feel like they want to just, you have classic rock, you can have classic hip hop. Yeah. People just want to keep one thing. It's okay for things to evolve and expand and grow. It doesn't change the foundation.
Hip hop. Rap is in a weird place right now, man. There's all kinds of stuff coming out of like
the
cracks of SoundCloud and all that, There's some cool stuff out there happening though, for sure.
Definitely appreciate everybody that has been listening to season 2 of I Got a Story to Tell. Make sure you are following Billionaire Bus at Billionaire Bus. You can follow the kid at Chris Dash. We'll see you guys in February for season 3 of I Got a Story to Tell. Thanks again, everybody, for your support.